we imagine that different ancient societies were totally separate, that the Romans were here and the Greeks were here and the Egyptians were here and the Mesopotamians were here. And in fact, there was so much interaction. Well, I'm interested in archaeology generally and Pompeii specifically because I'm interested in people. I want to know more about the variety of the human experience. I mean, there's a lot that's the same about us from culture to culture and time to time. We all want the same basic things, have the same hopes and fears on a fundamental level, but there's also such a huge variety of ways that our cultures can shape the way that we experience those things. So I want to understand the variety of experiences that are possible for people. And why Pompeii? Well, it's just such an extraordinary site. No matter what you're interested in the past, you're going to find evidence for it there. And it's just so easy to feel that you can connect with the past at a place where you can walk down the streets and see what looks like houses you could go into and go socialize with the owners if they were still there. Little bars and restaurants where it looks as though you could just order food and get some lunch. The past feels very present at Pompeii. The thing people sometimes imagine is that everybody died after the eruption of Vesuvius. A lot of people sadly did lose their lives, but there were survivors too. And this docu-series tries to tell the stories of some of those people, as well as those who didn't make it out. Another misconception I think people sometimes have about the ancient Mediterranean world is we imagine that different ancient societies were totally separate, that the Romans were here and the Greeks were here and the Egyptians were here and the Mesopotamians were here. And in fact, there was so much interaction throughout the millennia between ancient societies around the Mediterranean basin. And that is really apparent at Pompeii.
But I don't understand, Caitie. If that body was hers, why did she stay?
Well, one possible reason could be right here in front of us.
What, ISIS?
Romans had many, many gods, including a lot that originally came from other cultures, like Egypt in this case. And individuals could pick and choose which ones they wanted to be most devoted to. Isis was a cosmic creator. She could embody all of the gods in one. And she was also a mother figure. So she's a protector. She could keep people safe. She's certainly a god you might want to have on your side during a natural disaster.
So one of the themes that appears in the docuseries is that Egyptian gods, and more generally Egyptian culture, was very present at Pompeii. So one of the characters is invested in the worship of the Egyptian goddess Isis. And that is absolutely accurate. There was a huge temple of Isis in the middle of downtown Pompeii. And you could find imported goods and practices and ideas and even people from all over the Mediterranean world at Pompeii. So it wasn't just one little city on the Bay of Naples. It was also part of a much larger network that connected the Roman world with places far beyond. In fact, there's even an imported Indian statuette at Pompeii. So Romans were trading as far as India. I think we sometimes imagine ancient history the way that the ancient historians described it to us and through their perspective. And a lot of ancient authors were elite men, and they present the world the way they saw it and the way they wanted others to see it. And so women sometimes don't get their full due in those accounts. But when we look at the archaeological and the inscriptional record from a place like Pompeii, we can see that women were active in pretty much all spheres of society, from wealthy business owners to enslaved people, to householders and workers who were just trying to feed their families and get through their days. So you get a much richer picture when you look at all these sources of evidence that come from daily life and not just elite accounts. Well, one issue is preservation. If you look around whatever room you're in, most of the objects in it are not going to survive for thousands of years. And that was even more so in antiquity because they didn't have plastic or all kinds of other materials we have now that actually do survive really well. Most of what was in people's houses was organic materials, furniture, clothing that would decay. So we have lost, even at a place like Pompeii, where the preservation is so incredible, we have lost the vast majority of the physical world of the ancient people. So we have to piece together a fragmentary record. And it's a bit like a detective trying to piece together clues for a very long, cold case. Also, at a site like Pompeii, people have been working there for hundreds of years. I mean, the archaeology of Pompeii actually has its own archaeology. At the dig that I co-direct, we often find the physical remains of excavations from the 19th century. We found like terracotta pipes that these guys were smoking, for example, or tools they were using. This is a place where a lot of people have been working for a long time, and the methods that they had in the earlier days were very different from what we have today. They didn't have all the kinds of scientific documentation that we now have available. So even though a lot of Pompeii is excavated, that doesn't mean that we have a perfect archaeological archive from those excavations. Often we don't. And so we have to try to work with the archive as well as with the physical artifacts that survive. I think the graffiti are quite astonishing because you can see and read words that people were writing to each other in a way that a number of modern researchers have compared to social media. You can see people having whole conversations with each other in graffiti and sometimes talking smack about each other and not being very nice. But it feels very human and relatable. Some of the other finds that resonate with me the most are the ones that are personal. So, for example, at the site that my team excavates, we found lots of objects of daily life, like bone hairpins that somebody once used to get ready in the morning, or dice that people threw when they were playing games, or little glass perfume bottles that they would have used on a daily basis. And they're not necessarily the flashiest looking objects. You know, the paintings, the mosaics, the statues from Pompeii are all extraordinary, but it's the everyday objects that were part of people's routines, that maybe even were part of how they ornamented their own bodies. I get a real emotional charge out of those because they feel so personal.